Hey everyone, today I'm going to be trying something different and I'm going to try to take some of the pixel art that I've made for my game and then convert it into digital art that I might be able to use maybe as like a concept art or showing off a character design outside of the context of the graphics themselves. And I'm not sure yet how it's going to go. I've never done digital art. I don't even go from a sketch for these animations. So what I usually do is draw a silhouette on the pixel canvas, and a lot of the shape is defined by the fact that it's a square border and the size of it, and trying to get poses where you can see the limbs, and that way it would have a different shape than any of the other enemies in the game. But a lot of the choices I make just kind of end up haphazard as a way of fitting into the frame and fixing colors, fixing features, trying to make them stand out in this context. So I go from a silhouette like this to the final product. But I never had a sketch, I never had concept art. The character kind of just came about as I was drawing it. But I thought, what if I could do the opposite? What if I could reverse engineer it and make concept art? If I wanted to share that from the pixel art. And I think I probably should sketch out some character designs to be able to get more interesting character designs, but I'm not great at drawing. So I thought maybe reverse engineering it could be an exercise in teaching myself about the anatomy of my own characters, being able to learn those skills, almost like people learn by tracing, but in this case I'm doing something from my own art, pixel art that I already think looks good in pixel art, but I kind of arrived at it through trial and error. So I've pulled in the sprite as a reference into my art program at low opacity as a reference layer. I'll keep it its own layer. I'm not going to draw on that. I'm using Medibang. It's kind of really just started. I've been reading more manga lately, and I re-downloaded this program, which is kind of geared towards like making your own manga. And I was like, damn, I wish I could draw like that. So I played around with it, but only really to the point of learning the tool, like poking around in it and seeing what all the different brushes could do, and like, how do I want to approach this, how to use the program. Like I said, I've never done digital art. I really want a lot more of my non-devlog videos on this channel to be really focused at solo developers or people interested in game development. Less from a tutorial point of view, but more, how do you figure things out that aren't you or aren't your main skill set? Because for me, I could do a coding video, like I have a degree in computer science, but that doesn't make me the best programmer in the world. I think it's more interesting, instead of doing videos about something that I'm pretty comfortable with, doing all the videos on the things that I have to do that I'm not comfortable with, because solo developers have to learn all these skills. So this one is like one idea for how to make the concept art, and I'm really going to find out while filming this, is this even going to work? Is this a viable way? And we'll find out together, I suppose. So starting off, I think it makes sense to do an anatomy sketch of the pose. Now, I already have the pose. It's already done in pixel art, but figuring out like these are the steps I would follow if I didn't already have. And it's probably worth making sure that my anatomy makes sense. So, this is something I've never really done, but I guess the shoulder is here, other shoulder's there. I know often you see, well, this one's bigger, but it kind of makes sense because it's a tree branch, not a real arm. Sometimes you see like a curved line going across like that. Spine, probably the tailbone, like right there, or maybe it even curves like more than that. And then we have an elbow here. We have an elbow there. Draw the bottom half like this. I don't know. I've seen a lot of other artists. I've been watching a lot of art tubers to kind of get ready for this, but they draw like an underwear and then like holes where the legs come out of the body. And then I guess we'd have a knee here and there. Draw at the ball of the feet. This one's more forward. I guess the perspective kind of makes sense. So it's a slight bit bigger, I guess. And the upper body. And the head is like poking out of the hair here. So there's like the face, but the overall shape of the main sphere of the head is here. I've seen some artists do like a sphere, we'll round that out a bit, and then like a mask. So the shape of her face is pretty square. Feet are hard, but I'll just point where they're pointing, try to get an idea. I don't know, sometimes you might want to draw like a block there, but sometimes hands are like a square and then a triangle for the thumb, but the thumb is folded over, so I don't know if that really even works, but we'll see. And then I guess this one would be like a rectangular prism sort of this way, and then the thumb coming out like that of the side. And then we just draw the forearms there. So now if I turn off the reference and I look at that, I mean, it looks okay. I don't know. She's very short, actually. Short torso, although she's leaning back. But that's kind of what you get when you're drawing in a square canvas for pixel art. I guess I didn't put the hand where the leg actually was, so when you turn this off, it actually just looks like she's not touching her leg, whereas she is. So yeah, I mean, I guess it's pretty rough, but I got a better understanding of the proportions of my character, and we can kind of use it. I probably use the actual sprite as a reference more when I'm doing the line art, but if I were to start from scratch and need to do a pose sketch, then I would probably draw it in a square too and end up with shorter characters like this to get the similar style. So for line art, I kind of like the G pen because if I go to the regular pen, let me zoom in on a line here. It feels very like solid ink. And the G pen, it's not a pencil, but there's a little bit of, I don't know, roughness to the line. I think the pen would be a bit too bold for like a concept art, like it wouldn't really look like it was drawn. Whereas the G pen kind of, you can apply light pressure to it and have it be pretty sharp. I mean, you can make a pen sharp too, but it's very, very bold. So I think I'm going to start with things that are supposed to be a bit rough and smaller details, so I can start with shorter lines and then work my way up to longer, smoother lines. But a leaf should be pretty easy, right? Well, drawing consistent lines is hard. See, I don't have the pen control of an experienced artist, so these lines didn't even meet, but I guess the way to clean them up would maybe be to use an eraser. I mean, that looks okay. But at this pixel scale, I've got to make choices of like, yeah, I made that choice in pixel art for it to be this shape, but then what is the shape of this? Like, it's not this, right? So this line could pass anywhere through, and I have to make those choices of like, okay, it's a branch that comes from here and then maybe comes up. So maybe like that. It seems a bit too thick to attach to the leaf. A real twig probably is thinner like that, but then I want it to expand up to where it actually comes from. I drew several lines there, but if I clean them up with an eraser, it probably looks all right. See, now that twig is probably too thin, especially along here. Maybe just open up some space inside of it, or temporarily knock it down to a smaller brush size just for this tiny little area. See, even from here to me, that looks a little crooked. I don't know if that's the best way of doing it. Now, this branch probably like splits and sort of thins out here, and then maybe this goes into the main arm. That's too straight. Maybe it curves a bit. It comes up over to the thumb here, so maybe it should just go a bit higher. That part's looking pretty rough. I think I like the idea of this finger having a little sort of knob on it. I like that shape better. These lines are pretty messy. Plus I could draw that one up to there and sort of smooth out where they meet. So I drew that arm there and I'll have these meet. And I guess the ways to do it are like, you could start a new line and try to meet that. And if they don't quite meet, erase until you get it. Or you could try to end up on the line and then go to where you want to go. But either way, I think I have to do a little bit of cleaning up. I don't even know if artists, I know they get more confident lines, but like, do they get it pinpoint every time? I actually have no idea. See how that looks with no reference. I mean, pretty rough, but I think there's no detail in it. So let's draw without the bird to start. I think that would probably actually be curved, and then this would come up. Maybe we'll have that meet here. I guess the next easiest thing to do is this flower. See, how do you interpret one pixel? I don't want it to be too round and friendly, like petals like this. She's got kind of a stern face. She does have a flower, which is nice, but if I'm going to do that, I think I'll probably have more squared off petals. I don't know. It just looks a little less friendly. Then I don't know. Counterintuitively, I'd like to maybe start on the face. And I know the face is pretty important, but it's got smaller details that I can work out. Like, okay, this is a round log, although maybe a bit less round. How do I make it like square round? You know? And then I think the outline of the nose goes like here. This actually wasn't part of it. It was 2 pixels that I added on the bottom of the eye in any frame just to make it a little more like sharp and give it a bit more shape. So it should go to about here and then I guess come up like that. Or maybe just make it a bit round. Try the eye. I suppose there'd be a hairline here or here. And then in pixel art, the eyebrows look pretty square, but the shape of them could be just a kind of angry triangular eyebrow. How do I get something in between the two? Maybe like figure out the borders of it beforehand and then come up like that. Like fill it in and then I want it to be sharp. I'm going to erase to make the lines very straight. Put that hairline back. And then this is like not a square, but be kind of like it would lead into this. So maybe some kind of shape like that. I don't know if that works. I'll make this one pretty rough and then rely on the eraser to sharpen it up. I think for this erasing step, I just got to get it really close to get it clean because swiping over it is kind of making it quite rough. And then I could do like a thin line around here and here because there's 1 pixel, but probably just a thinner line. That one doesn't look quite round enough. Although maybe I do want it square. Let's try it more square. And then the iris goes here. I don't know. Does that look intense enough? Actually, let's erase it a bit and lean a little to the right side. That looks pretty good, I think. For the lips for every character I've drawn so far, I've tried to have like a dark upper lip. I'm not sure how to translate that into digital art though, because they've been pretty square. That looks all right. just clean it up a bit. So I kind of like it having a sharp upturn like that, and maybe not quite so thick. These like 4 pixels are supposed to be some kind of a strand of hair coming down. That's too thick. Maybe if I draw from the opposite end and lower pressure. So there's something like that here. I think the shape of her face is pretty square, so she probably has like a noticeable cheekbone there, but that's probably too thick for the details on her face. I'm just going to keep on going with the lines that I see in the original pixel art, but when I make a choice that kind of goes off, I'll cut back in. But like, for example, here, the strand of hair, it's not going to be perfectly straight down. Probably choose some other shape for it. And the vines here comes out and curls up, but then you have these vines hanging down. I had a bit of trouble with the head shape because this comes all the way to over here, and I might revisit that in the pixel art, but this is where I said the head would actually stop, but now I have all these lines, and this, although you can see it's darker over here and lighter over here, might be a line in the pixel art, but I think for this, that would just shading, and that's probably enough. Here I have the leg, and I'm going to have that loincloth just sitting on top of it a little bit, so it gives it some thickness. Hands are a pain, especially because I don't think I really got a good sense of the shape when I was doing it in pixel art either, but we'll have the last knuckle be here, and I guess it can come out like that, but maybe I'll actually shorten it. I'll have part of this finger into the thigh. The hand probably should have been smaller in pixel art too, but I don't think I can draw it as big as it is in this artwork, so I mean, I don't know. Hands are pretty hard. This isn't going to look great. I'm glad the other one isn't even a hand. But the feet are going to be even worse. These lines are really rough, but I'm giving it a little bit of an arch. And then if it could come out from here, then I don't know. Those don't look very good. Maybe shorter lines that look weirdly tiny. Well, that one looks better for the big toe, maybe. They just need to come up a bit. Doesn't look fantastic, but it's a little better. I mean, this last one is definitely too big, so we'll fix that up. I think maybe the big toe here doesn't look big enough. I mean, not fantastic, but not, the worst ever. We have these parts where the hair overlaps the arm, and I'll just draw them in and then erase the line that crosses over. So like this. Just turn these little hair dots into flowers. There was another big flower that's hidden behind the foot, and I pulled the foot back, but I think I might just move the whole flower itself. Just from going off the obvious lines in the pixel art and not including ones that could be shading, this is what I ended up with, and I didn't draw the bird yet. But if I turn this off, it's a start. I think those lines are looking kind of rough if you really look close at them. And there's no detail, there's no coloring, there's no shading, but it definitely could be something. So I'm going to keep going with this. I took that and I did a lot of cleaning up and adding details, just extra lines like hair right here, patches on the clothes. This was an issue I had with the pixel art as well, where I used the same tone or the same color ramp for the skin as the clothes, but the clothes were darker to make them look like brown, sort of leathery. But in the pixel art, I added dithering, like you can see right there, to sort of give it a patchy appearance, and I just translated that into these cross hatches like that. Lines to indicate wood, changed the eye shape, the flower shapes, added the bird, pretty basically drawn right now, but added a collar, just different things like lines on the cloth. And I think it's actually looking pretty good as a start. Like the line's still not clean, but I think what I'm getting used to is like not looking at something that looks kind of bad and then giving up on it, but realizing that like my early steps are going to look worse than an good artist's early steps, but anybody's early steps are going to look bad. And it looks a lot more polished when you polish it. And I think it's easy when your art doesn't look that good to like give up, but going through the whole process. And this is like, I'm telling you, I have not drawn a thing, like basically. And I think this looks pretty good for that. So now we're going to see how good it looks with color. I think the thing that makes the most sense is just to take some base colors from the original sprite and then lay them on a layer that's below the line art. And for this one, I'll just switch to a large pen because I'm just trying to cover everything. And like, see, I get outside the line there, I'll just erase because I'm on a different layer. So it's all good. So yeah, I mean, this step is really simple. I don't know how it will look, but I mean, it'll look flat. I know that. But I'm just going to fill everything with roughly the same color of base layer as in the original sprite. I think for areas like this, I'll just switch over to another color to show what my plan is because I'm going to skip ahead until the color is done. So here's what I'm going to do for areas like this. If something like clothes is over top of the skin and then there's sort of a argument over who comes first here, well, I think the lines are thick enough not to have that issue, but let's say they were. You would prefer to have this one go second, like over top of the red. And then if there's any conflicts, then at least the part that is supposed to be over top is over top. So I mean, you got areas like right here where it covers up, but like from a distance, it would just look like the clothes covering it up. You see actually a few green pixels left. But I think the line art is thick enough that I don't really have to worry about that. I can always cover it up right up to the line. Like right here is a good example. That's a thin line, so it's really close. I can just take green from up there. And my preference would be to go for a smaller brush and do the green second so that that overlays over top of the red, because this loincloth actually is over top of the skin. But yeah, I don't think this base coloring step is too complicated. I'm just going to be doing the whole thing. It's a coloring book, right? So I'll skip right ahead until I'm done. Actually, I'm going to do something smarter. I'm going to separate different colors on their own layer. Or at least I'll put skin on its own layer, clothes on its own layer, hair. That's probably enough. But I feel like, and I have not done digital art. I don't know enough of how that's done. I'm kind of just I'm going into shading blind, like completely blind right now, but I have a feeling that it will matter when I do shading, like trying to blend a darker red and then having it not really impact the green, for example, like that might be an issue. I wonder if it's just the color. It might have to separate different body parts that are overlaying on top into their own color. We'll see. I might be smart. I don't even know. We're maybe a third of the way through, and I can already tell that just adding even a base color is covering up some of how bad the line art is. All right, I finished up with my base color, and I moved the reference sprite over to the side since I don't need to trace it anymore. Now I'm more referencing the colors. So I think it looks pretty good. A few things stand out just in terms of like base color, and obviously like more things are going to go on top of it. But the contrast between the eye and this part of the nose and the face is not that great, so they probably need to be brightened up. I took the colors directly from the sprite, but that contrast would need to be increased. For some reason, I don't know, when I was tracing, I made the eyebrow and the top lip a black outline, which I think makes it stand out, and it's fine, but I might erase and leave space for it to be just a dark color instead. In the original sprite, I had a separate layer for the back of the hair and the front of the hair. So the front of the hair ended up having the same base color as the clothes, just being shaded differently. And here I took the darker green color for the hair. So I'll see if I can fix that just with shading and lighting by lightening up the front and top of the head here. I don't know why I interpreted the two dark pixels of the bird's eye to be this yellow. I don't know. I just drew it that way. Doesn't matter. And some things aren't going to be fixed by just shading, because they're not just shading, but they're variations in color, like texture of wood, and I don't know how I'm going to handle that yet, whether it should be started in the base layer or whether I need to do that now. Yeah, I don't know when I started. It's probably been about 3-4 hours though, and this is where I'm at now, and I'm pretty happy with it as a starting point. Still a long way to go, and I'm going into shading fully blind, so we're going to try that. The way I see it, there's a few ways I could approach shading. The first would be to take a light color, or well, lighting more than shading, and do it over top in the areas I want. And that's very flat shading. I don't know if that's what you consider cell shading, but that's one option. The other would be to do that, and then I guess you could probably blur it or try to blend it together. So like that looks more natural, but I don't think I can do it in a separate layer and then blur with the previous layer. So maybe the safest way would be to copy a layer and then like have it be a shaded layer on top of the base layer so you don't lose the original. What if I want to shade it and I do like black at low opacity? Does that work? I guess it darkens it. That's a dark green now. Might need even lower opacity. Yeah, that actually works if I just want to like go straight down in value. Although I've already kind of chosen, I guess that's just choosing a darker shade with no hue shift. And I've already chosen colors for light and shadow in my original palette in pixel art, because the lights skew a bit towards yellow and the darks skew a bit towards blue. So that is a bit of a yellower shade. I guess picking the gray and or doing white for light and black for dark would just be the same as picking a color without the hue shift. And I've already chosen colors. So probably what I would do is copy over a color layer, not change the original, but then like blend those colors into the shading. That's probably the way to do it. So this is the base color of the skin. What if I start with the one 2 tones down and just try to copy what I did for the original? So the underside of the nose, the sides of the face, and then under around the jaw and into the neck. around the side of the face here. And this is behind the nose. I think it's only 2 tones, and I'm not an expert in shading. I don't really know what I'm doing, but it's kind of a reasonable start. I don't know how strong the blur should be, but just check that out. If I blur, is it going out of bounds? It is going on the hair a little bit. Let's see like that. I mean, I'm doing it really sloppily because I don't know what it'll look like yet, but that's actually, I'll do it more carefully, but this is what I'd be going for type of thing. Let me undo it. Like the flat shading is very like cartoony. All right, so what are we at? We're at 100% blur intensity. Let's try 60 and maybe a smaller one just to do kind of the edges. I think we can still see that the shape of these lines isn't totally clean. Maybe I'll clean them up first. So I'm just making even the shading lines pretty straight. I think if I blurred it enough, it would go away, but I think this is a way of making it so that you don't have to do heavy blur to get rid of it, maybe. So that even just enough to blend it should still look clean, hopefully. Add a little shadow under there. This one could be longer, actually. Why not? So it probably would be on the other side if the light's hitting it from this side, but whatever. Maybe we could add a little more to this, so it's a bit more of an empty space, or a more hollower space. And then if I go back to the smaller blur at 60% blur intensity, let's see. I think I'm blending in the lighter color from the opposite side of this line, and I don't want that. So maybe I just need a smaller brush. And that doesn't quite seem blended enough, so I think probably a high intensity is okay with a smaller brush. Well, the edges look smooth, but they don't exactly go farther than their own region, really. Passing over it many times doesn't seem to do a whole lot. It seems to just kind of grab things from all over, or around that general area. So to avoid getting lighter color from the opposite side, I mean, I could patch that up. I could go over it with a darker color again. But the other thing would be, I guess, to go along these edges, even with a big brush and higher intensity, and just be careful about it. Like, because once I blur it, it's blurred. It doesn't seem to have much effect to do more than that. But then it doesn't have quite the volume you would want. So we should probably add light. My issue with the color palette I was using, well, first of all, the reds on here were actually a bit hard to deal with because I had these reds. I went a little bit darker for the pants and sleeve, but then lighter than that, the highlight of the red, it was veering towards yellow, and it was a bit of a big jump. I think it was one of the first colors I chose, and I was thinking it would be more like a reflective highlight, but I have a hard time going higher than this yellow in the pixel art in the palette I've chosen, and I might end up changing the palette slightly. But for now, like if I put that on there, it'd be this bright. If I blend it in though, I should be able to get it. Like, yes, it's a pretty bright highlight, but I mean, let's see what it does for us. Blur that. That's pretty shiny. I don't know if I want it to look like that. If I spread it out even more. Well, that's just muddy. This much is okay, but it kind of looks flat. I mean, I would add it in more places, but I think I'm headed down a road where it would look flat. What if I smudge it around before blurring it? I mean, you can still see the shape of that smudge, which I don't really like. What about natural blur? What's the difference? Or soft blur? I don't know. I mean, maybe I should be picking tones that are in between these. Let's try something out first. I went to the darkest tone for this, and then I skipped over this tone in between because I figured the intermediate values, but that keeps a pretty clean border. So what if I just went with that second darkest and then blurred that? Yeah, we can tell that doesn't quite blend. I think these regions are just keeping their own borders too tightly. Maybe if we bump up the blur intensity, but maybe to blend the multiple tones together, we could smudge. Try a soft smudge and just kind of like, yeah, pull the shadows around. What's this gonna do? I picked kind of a big one, but just kind of pull these different values into each other's zone. I mean, that looks super muddy. That's not good. That didn't really work, but I'm learning how things work. Well, I found one problem, which was that when I tried to clean up these lines, I drew them in and then I tried to make them somewhat straight before blurring. If I turn off the base color, you can see what I've done. I've erased that, so then when I tried to blur it, I could even try to do it on this layer now. So then when I try to blur it, it looks like that, because I think what I'm really doing is blurring it with white, or not white, transparent, instead of with the base red that was copied over into the shaded layer. So that's an issue that I need to fix. I think instead of erasing to clean up these lines, I would color over with the color that I want it bordered by. So I'm going to start the shading over, and it occurred to me that one problem could be that the pen I was using, that color is a solid color no matter where you go. And then when I was trying to blur the edges, it may have been that these colors are just too much of one block, and you can only really blur around the edge of it. But I should have been maybe using a pen that has different values like watercolor, or maybe not that exactly, but Let's see if I go with a high color mixing level on a watercolor brush. At least there's different values in that. It's not a ton of variation in it. There's some of these soft ones though that if you pass over it multiple times, that can add different values. See, that's much different than that. So you can have different values of shading. So that's an option. So let's say if I take like a soft turn-up pen and go over it multiple times that I want to be darker. I mean, even on its own, just the brush strokes actually look pretty good. And I might want to try to find a solution that isn't blur, just because blur just muddies things. But I mean, if I blurred that, that looks better than what I had been doing before. So after testing a few things out, I'm finding what I like the best is just the solid shading. Like not this is not a clean version, this was just a test, but solid shading with multiple levels. I've also enhanced the outline here, put another layer on, where you get that dark outline where the darkest shadows are, and it's just pitch black. And that's easy enough for me to do. It's something I can do. I think it ends up looking a little cartoony, but we'll see how it looks with more shading on. And then I think after doing cleaner layers of this on every piece of the body, then maybe there's something we can do to add some color variation with like airbrushing and whatnot. But for now, I like how it's turning out. That's the first thing. I think it's turning out pretty good for somebody who's never done digital art at all. But it also is a cartoonier style that like more cell shaded that like I guess I don't even know if I'm using that term correctly. But it's different than the vibe you would get off of the game. Because the game, if you compare it to other pixel art, this is kind of more realistic. Like it's a bigger style, it doesn't have any outlines, kind of a higher number of colors, and then like a lot of details just all over the place because I don't leave a lot of flat areas. I just keep adding things. And some of it can be kind of like sketchy to try to compensate for my lack of ability to keep a consistent clean outline and shading. I do a lot of like sketchy details. And it kind of makes it more realistic, or it looks like a more old school PC game graphics maybe. And what the vibe you would get off of that is probably that the concept art for a similar game would be more of like, you know, like 80s, 90s fantasy, more like a realistic illustration, you would think maybe. And I can't do that, but I can do this. So the vibes are sort of reversed, where like you might imagine this fantasy world, I guess. And then in an older game, the pixel art might be the compromise that you have to make to get it in the game. This is sort of the reverse. My digital art is a compromise because I'm not very experienced in it. But in terms of reverse engineering this and getting this, it's better than I thought I could do. That's for sure. So I'm going to keep going with the shading and see how it turns out. I'm going to add probably 3-4 colors of shade, probably like 3 clean layers of different levels of shading, and then maybe a highlight, and I'll come back, and then maybe we'll try to airbrush or something. So I'm not recording the whole process this time. The video is running kind of long, and just coloring it, I'm not making a lot of decisions that I can talk about. It's pretty straightforward. I'm just straightforwardly doing what I said I would do, but I'll just stop to check in right here. This is how it's looking so far. Like, not bad. I think the different levels of shading actually kind of work, although I'm getting a bit of an effect of like pillow shading. So I've gone ahead and shaded everything, and I think I'm pretty much done with like basic color shading. Each color has like 4 or 5 tones. So for red, we got this base that's pretty much the lit part of the face, then the shaded part of the face, more shadow, and then the darkest shadow, and then everything goes to black, and we have a highlight. And then for green, we got the light one, which is kind of acting as the highlight, but it's pretty broad, and then like base color, I guess, shaded part, and then it gets darker here. So that would be like 4 tones. It's roughly in that range for everything, and I've gone over everywhere. I used shading to add details in different places, so like folds of clothes here, I would go with one shade, like a triangle, and then kind of scratchy parts with the darker one. We got a fold here in the knee. I followed the lines for a lot of them. Like if there's a line here, I consider that a fold, and then I would put like shadow on the side, on one side, probably where the light would be hitting one side, and then to be shaded on the other side. But then other ones I just suggested without a line. So here I added a light, and that adds a bit of texture. The hair, there's a lot of that. We have like strands of hair that don't relate to lines, but then others that the shading closely follows the lines. I augmented the patches by adding some shading to the lines. And on the wood, I just added like these little dots of texture all over the place, streaks. So I went into this not really knowing what I'm doing, but there's certain things that make sense, and trying to follow them that just kind of makes sense intuitively. Like, I don't know how much light should be hitting the hand, but I know light is coming from the front. So instead of drawing all the fingers the same, I made sure that there was a decreasing amount of light from each. So it maybe hits this thumb from the front and this finger, but then there's less on each finger after that. It doesn't matter what level of light I drew them at. If I drew them all the same, it would look pretty bad. So I don't know if this is the correct amount of light hitting the finger compared to the amount of light hitting the stomach here. But I do know that this is the right amount of light to hit this finger relative to this finger. And I think that type of stuff that you just think about for a second and it makes sense helps a lot. Suggestions of texture that don't go along with the line, I think helps a lot, especially with the hair. I have like a little pattern on the shirt here that suggests a leaf, muscles, So I'm very, very happy with this. I think it looks a little bright. So I've gone ahead and made another copy of the document and merged all the layers in my main drawing together. And if we compare it to the sprite, I feel like it comes off very bright. And I don't know if even though I'm using the same colors, and I don't know if that's because the regions of color in here are so small, like this could be just a pixel. I would say the read you get off the sprite, even though it needs to be displayed brightly in the game to be readable as a game, the read you get off the character is that I thought I was using a more desaturated palette in game. So we can try to bump down the saturation and brightness, even just by a little bit. And I feel like that looks a little more natural. I had almost gone down to like -20, but I felt like it was too much. Maybe that. I don't know. That's looking a little dark. I think I'll keep maybe the brightness like that and the saturation just slightly down. I think I'm finding that the pixel art palette I used wasn't as desaturated as I thought. I think my values hovered around like 50% saturation, which I thought might be kind of low, at least not super bright, like in the 70 to 80 range, but I think it should be a bit bright. It looks decent in game, but I think the read you get off the character is more like this. And then for other post-processing, I tried some blurring and like for example, I could go in and I could blur my edges here, or I could, like, for example, the hair, you can really see it. With all these streaks from a distance, it can make that look more realistic. But I don't know, maybe I just don't know how to implement it properly, but I think for now I'd like to just stick with the clean style that I have. I don't think what I was doing in blurring looks better. Like, it doesn't look better than what I already have. For this, at least. I think if I'm saying I want to go with, like, a more grounded style for the concept art, then, like, this kind of blur might actually do it. But I think if I tried that now, I would probably just mess it up. And then I talked about possibly airbrushing a bit, but I don't really know what to do with that. Like, I don't know if you're supposed to airbrush, the lightest color. I thought maybe you would be airbrushing light onto things like this, maybe, but that's too much. And then if I lower the strength, that doesn't really look good. I don't really know how people use it. So I tried a few things. I didn't know if I was supposed to airbrush the color of light or just the lightest color of like that, or just like the lightest color of the shade that you're in, or what you're supposed to do, or how you use it to touch up. It might look good on some styles, and in fact, I'm sure it does, but I don't know what I was supposed to do with it. So I think I'm actually just going to leave this drawing. I think this has come a long way for my first digital art, and maybe we can revisit it when I learn some more stuff. But as for now, the answer to the question, I guess, can I generate concept art from pixel art that's pretty reasonable? I think the answer is yes. Especially with more practice, the answer is yes. The answer to the question, would I share this for marketing my game when I need to? Probably not. I think I'd probably try to learn a new style or try to learn new techniques. But could this style and this level of effort work for another game? I think so, yeah, with more practice. And I think, if anything, here's my takeaways for this video for you. If you have a game where this style would suit, I think you can do this. I think digital art isn't necessarily as intimidating as it might seem. My other takeaway is, if you are going for a style that is more complicated than this, or even this, if this is something that you don't feel like you can do, art is hard, and paying for artists is worth it, especially in this age of AI, and I think we should value artists. And I don't consider myself an artist for having done this. I'm just doing what I can for my own game. But yeah, the work that actually talented people do it's real. This for me took. I mean, I'm on the second day now. It took. I don't know. I wasn't timing. I'd probably say like 9-10 hours though, for real. And like, it could be a lot better. And I'm sure there's people who are a lot better who could do this faster and could do something more impressive in the same amount of time. So, but yeah, thanks for watching. I'm going to have more videos probably on pixel art, more devlogs almost every week. I'm going to have more videos focused on solo devs and like how do you approach teaching yourself to do things. And if this was at all helpful to you, I'd be happy for you to subscribe and wait for another video because I should be uploading pretty frequently. Oh, I also want to mention my last devlog kind of blew up on a small scale. My videos up till now had been reaching like 50 to 70 views, and it was a slow climb up to that. And then my last devlog got 1,000 views. The algorithm just kind of blessed it, I guess. So if I don't know if people are going to watch this one, the same thing will happen, but I welcome to all my new viewers. I'm kind of blown away. And thank you to all the people who have subscribed. That brought in quite a few people who wanted to subscribe. And yeah, I'm kind of blown away at how fast that jump from 70 to 1,000 happened. And I guess I'm talking to quite a few people now. Maybe if it happens again for this one, but thank you everyone very much.